Frank. I was thinking, by the way, I really like your book. I was reading it over the weekend, and I'm shocked you and I don't know each other, because it seems like we've run
Yeah, right.
really shocked. It feels like we've run in the same circles. I mean, I'm good. I was in SoCal for a long time and did a little bit of damage here and there, and good friends with everyone from, Carasosa to Jeanette to Angel to, Alex Levy down in Del Mar, and yeah, a bunch of people. I just can't believe we never crossed paths.
Yeah. Well, the last 15 years, it's been a whirlwind. I've been gone on the road, just traveling, and it was really enjoyable. I liked it. I coached the coaches in, probably half the countries around the world, and it was great. But we were just ready to come home and stop. Be human again.
Yeah, I hear you. My wife and I, we actually made the other move. I was grinding away in SoCal with some good players and traveling, but different than you, different capacity, Orange Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Winter Super Nationals, stuff like that, clay courts, and just grinding in SoCal. We just left about a year ago.
Really?
Yeah, you're one of the reasons I'm sorry I left, because we should be meeting in person, but yeah, we came out here to Colorado. I guess we'd had enough of the paradise, and paradise at $6 a gallon.
Yeah. Where are you in Colorado now? What part?
Well, we're building a home up in the mountains, and right now
Wow.
we're in West Denver. So we just started framing about a week and a half ago. So I think we got another 3 or 4 months to go before the house is finished. And then we're looking forward to living up there in the mountains. And I spent my whole life pretty much on the coast. So I never really, first Connecticut, then California. So I never really got into the mountains. But I have to say, it's like, I tell people, it's like graduating college. I feel like I'm just starting all over. I'm making new friends and I love it up here. I think it's a really, the mountains just, man, I can't believe I'm a mountain man. I was always a beach guy, and I just love it up here.
Well, way to go.
Yeah.
I have a pull towards mountains too. I don't know why, but I just I love going up there too. You get the same kind. To me, I always had that same kind of energy as being on the beach or being, walking around with big trees up in a mountain somewhere.
Yeah, it's a little different, I guess. I was a surfer, so I was going to say I missed that, but I missed it my last year in California. It got so crowded, Costco selling those damn foam boards. It quadrupled the people in the water. So I just got so pissed off. I said, I'm done with this sport. But I guess out here in the mountains, it feels so wide open, I mean, just mountains and mountains. And the air is a little thinner. I mean, the air is different to breathe here. It really is.
Yeah.
Like we were training yesterday. I coach a good player out here, solid 12 UTR guy, good player. And I mean, he's already probably top 10 in the nation in 35s, but we want to be one. And we're practicing up there in the mountains at some courts that at a country club where they're letting us play. They sort of invited us. It's really nice. It's a different kind of a workout. My guy said to me, he goes, man, I feel the air is thinner up here. He says, it's going to be awesome next week. We're playing the state open down in Denver. He said, I'm going to be so ready because the air is so much thinner up there. So it's just, it's different. So let me introduce you really quickly. We just started chatting. Like I said, I kind of feel like I know you just because I should know you. I know Peter Smith really well. I hung out with him quite a bit, spent a lot of time with him, of course, because of Stevie Johnson and working with him in the juniors. I got to know, I know him really well and did a few exhibitions with Pete. And I know all these guys because I've seen your name all over the place. But anyway, you're living at the 45 right now. I'm not sure if you know what that means, but in our world, it's a big deal living at the 45. And I'm just happy and pleased as I can be to meet you for the first time on live podcast. I'm talking with Frank Giampaolo, and he's got a terrific book out. Just someone had to do it. Someone had to do it right about the tennis parents. I mean, it's an easy read. It's a fun read. And welcome to our world over here. And there's lots of people I know will be watching this. So,
Well,
say hi to
man,
everyone and introduce yourself as needed.
yeah, no, thanks so much. I appreciated it. So I'm finally with the legends. Thanks, Jeff,
Oh,
for getting me on this thing. And
legend as in old, maybe.
no, but we'll have some fun. I'm sure we can banter a bit and maybe even help some coaches and parents and maybe even a few athletes. So
Yeah, no, you're absolutely well. It's funny. I was reading your book. It's very different read than Dave. Dave Smith. You must.
yeah, sure.
Anyway, Dave and I did a series of about 8 podcasts because we just thought it'd be a good idea. Sort of what you just said there. Maybe it'll help some coaches, some parents, some players. And he's written a nice couple of books himself.
Oh yeah.
Different writing style. I will say it was a pain in the ass, I thought at first, because I'm like, shit, I got Zoom call on Sunday. I'm coaching. I've got finals. I want to watch the finals of the US Open and the semis.
Right.
And I had such a busy weekend. I said, shit, I'll try to look at his book. It's an easy read. I thank you for not trying to speak above your audience. And thank you for not dumbing it down, because I really enjoyed it. I've worked with a ton of kids, a ton. And man, their parents could use this. And I think coaches could really use your book. I got to tell you, a lot of people throw their books at me, ask me to write stuff on it. You didn't, because you didn't know me, but I would have written a glowing report, because I got to tell you, it really made me dig deep back to when I worked with Mike Query, Sam's dad. Terrific tennis parent, by the way, terrific. Then a completely different style with Steve Johnson Sr., completely different style. God rest his soul. I liked Steve, and I were friends, but he was a much tougher and different kind of tennis parent than Mike was. Mike and Chris,
Yeah.
Much different. Same with Foreman and Warren Wood. I mean, everyone's parents were a little different, but in some way you had a thin red line going down the book, who the best parents would be. And these guys had those traits.
Yeah.
And,
Wow. It's interesting that we really have had a parallel, because 3 of the kids you mentioned, I worked with 3 of those as well when they were kids. So they must have just banged around a little bit. And I mean, I remember Warren was a terrific kid. And, of course, I was up at Sherwood Country Club managing that tennis facility when I met Sam when he was a young kid. And we worked for a few years together. And yeah, but isn't it interesting? They all have different pathways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Warren's parents were pretty, the mom, she was pretty into it. Kevin was too, actually, the dad, but they kind of let Warren do their thing. And I'd say the same about Sam. But Steve, a whole different story with Steve. He was in there like stink on a monkey, you know what I mean? And that's not to put him down, because he did some great things. I mean, look, he was a great coach himself, Steve.
Yeah.
And strange circumstances how he died, though. They still, Foreman told me they still, after 5-6 years, no autopsy. They still don't know what it was. He just went to sleep and never woke up.
Yeah.
They think it's related to his heart, but they just don't know.
Yeah, I bet. I suspect he wasn't the kind of guy that canceled lessons to go to doctor's appointments. He probably did vice versa, right?
It's funny. Steve was really funny. I would have thought he'd live decades beyond me. I'm not so good. I mean, we go to Orange Bowl, we go to the hard courts now, all those tournaments, right? Because the boys played dubs together. Foreman and Johnson played dubs together in the 14, 16s, 12s, all those young groups. And I'm having dinner, and I'd have a beer or two. And no, not Steve. Boy, he just wouldn't have a beer. I mean, he was really straight-laced. Steve Sr. Of course, Steve Jr. was. Steve Jr. was too. But I don't know what it was. He just, and when we'd have lunch together every Monday, we'd have lunch together. And then we work with the boys Monday, Wednesday, Friday for about 3 years over at the Rancho San Clemente. tennis, and you know where that tennis is? Nice little club.
Yeah.
Lifetime bought it, unfortunately, because they turned.
Ironically, I opened that club with Bob Lutz in the 90s. So I was the first director of that club for about 10 years.
Really? So you worked with that guy, what was his name? Lloyd. That's it.
Yes. Anyway, so that was a very interesting part. But then I went back to work with Vic Braden after that as his agent, and decided to travel with him and the senior tour. If you remember back in the day, it was called the Nuveen Tour, and
I do.
It was like Johan and McEnroe, and it was like the Globetrotters. Really, it wasn't that serious.
Yeah. No, they knew who was going to win before the match started. Yeah, I know.
Yes, but it was a blast, and so we did. We're running the same circles, and that was a beautiful club up there for sure.
Yeah, it was a sweet little gem up there in the mountain, overlooking the beach. I mean,
I was so happy when Stevie took it over after Steve Johnson Sr., and then he did a great job. But yeah, that was a travesty in our industry to lose him. So
it was. He was one of a kind. He was real old school, and it's funny. I use that word old school. So I'm reading your book, I'm a little more than halfway through your book, which I have to give myself props for, because like I said, it was a bitch of a weekend to read and to find the time to read. But
is it the Tennis Parents Bible that you're?
Yeah, the one that you sent me. And I got to tell you, that word comes up a lot as I'm reading your book. And it's I think it's flattering personally, but old school, that came up in my mind a lot. Talking about the coaches and the parents and dignity and respect and things that, I think guys like you and I might see as just very, very simple, like, of course, but we've lost so much of all this stuff today. I don't know if parents and coaches have the kinds of talks. My dad used to call them father-son talks. Hey, we're going to have a father-son talk. And we talk about things like loyalty, discipline, appreciation. I just don't know if that exists that much anymore. And because your book is filled with it. And I'm like, well, these are real life lessons here. But I kept thinking, but this is really old school stuff.
Well, I hope that people that read some of the books find the connection, that it is it's the predecessor to even preparing properly for tournaments and training properly, that if they don't have wonderful life skills and character traits, they're not even going to train right. So getting results, forget about it, in my opinion. So that comes first. And that is kind of the parent's job description. A lot of times, uneducated tennis parents, they're overstepping their boundaries a little bit. And they're trying to teach, bend your knees on your low backhand volley. They're not leaving that stuff to the coach, because they're just not taught what their job description is. Once they learn, okay, my job is this X and O, and the coaches are doing this side, then it's kind of a beautiful harmony, with the parent, player, coach. But if parents are not educated, they're usually, well, the analogy I would use, they're usually the ship's anchor when they should be the ship's motor,
I read that. Yeah. Was it motor or rudder? I can't remember, but yeah. But you're right about the anchor part. It's funny. I'm reading your book and I'm thinking back to some of the players that I had. I won't mention some names now because these are negative stuff. But there was one kid, he was number one in the boys. This is when they had boys 10s. You may be too young to remember that, but they had boys 10 and unders in the SoCal sectionals. This was, 96, 97, right in there. I think they stopped doing 10 and unders around 2001 or 2002, but they had a 10 and unders. And I had a boy, he was number one in SoCal, and he won the sectionals and the 10s. He had a mother. I mean, every time he would miss, she'd slap her leg like that. And this kid, I saw it in the 10s, he started getting a twitch. By the time he was 12, he had a terrible twitch. By the time he was 4, really, and it was constant. It was all the time. He would just twitch all the time. it was a habit that he ingrained from this habit of hers. And of course, by the time he was second year of boys 14s, not only did a ranking drop, he quit and started playing lacrosse.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the terrible stories. And I can think of some others. I'm sure I can't tell you any stories that you haven't heard before, but that was one that stuck out in my mind. This kid had a real talent for tennis. I mean, he was something else, but he quit the game completely. And I think it destroyed him in a lot of ways. He had this tick. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
He
It's sad. And with some of the studies, you know that 70% of the kids quit by the age 13. And the number one reason reported is tennis parents. And it's the same in every sport. So it's not a tennis issue. It's not sport related. It's just, the ego of the parents really that they just need to be educated in every sport. How to be a world-class parent.
Well, so, I think they call them stage mothers, and other things, right?
Yeah, that's right. Remember that? Yeah, helicopter parent or tiger mom or it's common all over the world, right?
Well, I think part of it, and the other thing that kept striking me also was you have to be a good person to be a good coach. You have to be a good person to be a good parent, and that is an issue in itself, because how do you deal with a parent or a coach even that's not a good person? I had some of my kids, I remember Foreman and Karen, his sister Karen, she was a good player. They went to a clinic or a workout somewhere, because I would always send them out. I was more a private guy, even though I did a lot of big workouts in the early 2000s. I don't know, I was making more money doing privates or something. I really enjoyed the privates more. And I don't know if you're familiar with my boards, those things that swivel and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
So anyway, I was more interested in technical stuff. I really went from being a hardcore everything coach, trying to study nutrition and everything. I said, no, I'm going to just lock in on technical. So I'd send my kids out to these clinics, whether it was Barnes Center or La Costa or wherever the new clinic was, you'd have to try it out, right?
Yeah.
Well, my two of my kids went, and they came back to me and they said, Jack, before the workout, we were just, sort of stretching and fumbling around, and the coach had us all there. He gives us a lecture on when is a good time to cheat. And I was just like, I was appalled. I will not mention the coach's name. You probably know him. And I was just shocked. I just said, well, you can forget that. That's bullshit. You can just forget it. And, Foreman had a bad habit of playing serves that were this far out. He played them in. In fact, you know what? Most of the great players did that. Sam did it. Stevie to some degree, not as much as the others. Warren was terrible. And I said, Warren, this is a gold ball tournament. What the hell are you doing? He goes, man, I just, I got sick. The guy double faulted 3 times in like 4 games. And I just wanted to hit the ball. I said, are you out of your mind? So, I mean, the best players, they really, at least my best players didn't cheat, but I couldn't believe that a coach was literally coaching them on when is a good time to cheat and how to cover the ball with your feet and your body so they can't tell where it hit the line and I was just like besides myself. This was back in 2002, 2003. But have you ever heard of that?
Well, yeah. In different countries, I've heard the coaches and players talk about, the athletes in Spain would say, our coach tells us to cheat in the first couple of games just to see if the opponent is confrontational enough. Are they going to come up and confront me on the issue or not? And if they're not, then we can cheat later on when we need it. That was interesting, I thought. I did get, I moved to California right from Ohio State in 85. And I went straight to the Vic Braden Tennis College to work. But I got to meet Jack Kramer a bunch. And I remember he said back in the 1930s, there was about 6 bad calls per match.
Wow,
so,
really?
Yeah.
When there was not that much money in it.
Yeah. But I got to be honest, kind of like you, I'm more concerned about when our athletes hook themselves. They have an ad in and they play a ball that's 4 inches out and then they lose the point. Now it's back to deuce and they cheat themselves out of the game because they're not making the call. So it sure gets interesting with that whole side of it. And to me, it's always about, it's not the drama, but it's how they handle the drama. And with kids, I give the analogy of like if a rattlesnake bites them, is it the bite that kills them, or the venom coursing through their veins for the next 5 hours? And the kid goes, well, no, it's the venom. And then you're like, well, yeah, that's the same thing with cheating. They might get 1 point, but if you're still stressing about it and you're still thinking about it, you could lose games if you're not handling it. So I guess that's a big part of the mental emotional education, is pre-setting protocols. How do they handle hooking and cheating, and people that, flip the score, or in different countries, they're great at accusing you of cheating. So, our player would be up 3-1.
Yeah.
And the foreigner would throw their racket down. It's 3-3. What are you talking about? And
oh yeah.
so it gets all exciting, but to me, most of the time it's control what you can control. And when I have conversations with most parents and players, especially if we're doing match play video analysis, they do seem to be, cheated at it 2 or 3 points. But then I would remind them, what about the 40 unforced errors you made in the match?
Right.
Maybe you can think about controlling that, and you don't have to worry so much about the 2 or 3,
Well, I think for me, you're right. I think for me, it's more about, I think about certain kids that really had beautiful games, and they were beautiful kids. They weren't tough. But they were sweet, good kids. And the cheating chased them out of the game. And that kind of bothers me. I think that's what bothers me the most about it. Not at the highest levels, because they can handle it. I mean, Foreman, I think it was at the hard courts in the quarterfinals. Oh my God. I thought Steve was a big guy. I thought he was going to jack this guy up. It was, he cheated him so bad. He says, if you friggin' cheat one more time, I'm going to kick your ass. I mean, and a lot of players could do. I know Alex did it when we played dubs, Levy down in Del Mar.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice player. Great guy. Anyway, he was a tough hombre when it came to that. So at the high levels, I don't think it really matters. I just don't like the way it chases kind, sweet kids out of the game, because they could be enjoying the game their whole life, but they have a bad taste in their mouth from, let's say, the 12 and unders. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I find that a lot of the athletes, it's nature and nurture. You know what I mean? Like some kids are natural born warriors, and they are fine fighting. Some have to be nurtured. Like maybe they come from a family with siblings and they have to fight for the last slice of pizza, or the remote control, or whatever. They're used to fighting. But other kids are born, they're natural born warriors. They worry about everything. And some kids are just wired like that, and they're driving to the tournament site and they're already worried about, the wind blowing at 18 miles an hour, and the sun angle, and there's a shadow on the court. And, they can pick a million things to worry about. And so kids are just wired differently. And that's, I guess, part of our job as coaches, is to, teach both sides, teach the hardware and the software how to handle anxieties like that. And
yeah, I know. I used to tell. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it sure is interesting at the higher levels, because I find myself nowadays teaching more of the software, like the mental and the emotional. A lot of the kids that I'm working with nowadays, I'm doing this. There's a new SCTA high performance group called Team SoCal. They're doing again this year, but it's Paul Anacone and I are doing it starting January. We've been doing it every month, a couple times a month, and we're just working on the software side. But it sure is interesting. Kids are just wired a little bit different, and it's our job to get into their world and figure out how they tick and how they handle these issues. I
like the way you put that. I like the way you put that in the book. Is don't have the athlete try to get into your world. You and the coach have to get into their world, and that was something that struck me pretty nicely. I thought That's good thinking, because kids are different, very different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a big part, and you see it in different countries, even like, for example, when I was working at an academy in Barcelona, we were doing some mental emotional stuff, and they teach what they call the Spanish method, right? You've heard
I
of
know.
it.
Well, I worked over at Emilio's in Barcelona for a
Okay,
week.
so but
I
they
was
still have
there.
kids. Mandatory. They got to stay 15, 20 feet behind the baseline, get 30
Right.
balls in time. And my
And they
point
all
was,
teach, and then the Spanish way, right? I don't know when you were there, but I was there. Let's see, I was over there in 2006, I think. It was all this, you gotta lift that front foot.
oh yeah,
That was a big deal. That's what I remember about it. I met Jordi Arresti, I met Emilio, and they were all teaching to lift your foot up.
yeah. But man, I think it's terrific. People have systems. I think it's important for them. But to me, it's more of a customized situation. Like, what if players like Sampras or Williams sisters, what if they were forced to stay 15 feet behind the baseline and get 30 balls in? They may have quit the sport. We may not.
You're right. I mean, Serena now, after that last tournament, if she gets any more inside the baseline, she'll be short hopping everything.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, it's a laugh a minute out there, right?
Yeah, I guess it is. Like I said, it really evoked your book. I don't know. I guess the purpose really is to help people and grow the game and all that stuff. But for me, it just evoked some old memories. I mean, there were some strange things that happened on my court, not just the mothers who come out on their high heels and walk out on the court to say something to their daughter, not that. And their daughter did end up being in the top 50 in the world. So I can't say, maybe she was right. But then I had one fella, his son, he had two boys, and his son was the older one. He won the national clay courts, boys 14s, good player. And he had a little brother, and I was teaching him, and he was only 7 years old. The older brother was 11. And I hadn't thought about this in decades until I read your book. But the father comes out, Middle Eastern guy, tough Middle Eastern guy, and wealthy, very wealthy. And his son's goofing around. We're having fun. He's 7. And I try to keep it light. We're on the swivels, So I think he hit a ball and he spun around or something, which I like. Sam used to do that. I think it's fun when the kids realize, I've got so much balance. I can hit the ball and spin around and stick the landing. So I was smiling, and it brought up this memory, and I completely blocked it out because it was so disturbing. So disturbing. The father comes out and yells at the kid starts crying. He says, repeat after me. He says, you're wasting the coach's time. And I was like, Jesus, this is a little overkill. I had no idea how overkill it was. Then he says, repeat after me. Now, this is to a 7-year-old. Time is money. Money is power. Power is everything. Repeat that. The kid says, I don't want to. He says, you repeat it. He made him repeat that 3 times, tears rolling down the kid's face. I'm humiliated. I'm mortified. I don't know what to do because, you can't just say to the father, what the hell is the matter with you? Which is what I wanted to say. That's where I was getting to about 15 minutes ago. It starts with being a good person.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if just reading your book will be enough to make someone a good person, It's only going to ring true with people that have a conscience,
Yeah, that's exactly right. But the good news is the only people that'll pick up the book are the ones that have, the conscience, and the people that are more of that type A personality. They're not going to read a book. They already know it all. You know what I mean? So
you're probably right about that.
I just kind of figured, what, I'm going to help people that are seeking out the help, and the people that need the help the most probably are not going to be seeking out help. That's kind of what I found. But if we can help the masses, that's great. And anyway, that was the whole concept with that one. That the first edition came out in, I think, 1998, 99. And then the second edition, which you have, I think, came in a couple of years ago. And,
yeah, that's the one I have.
Okay. So now we're just finishing the psychology of tennis parenting, which goes even a little bit deeper into the actual job descriptions and the conversations that parents should be having with their athletes and how they should be involved and what are their roles in this whole process. And so look, I think it's a great time right now to be doing this. There's a lot of openness to the software side. Like I think I even remember watching the ladies US Open finals a couple of days ago, and they did the interview, off-court interview, and the top gal says that she's been with her sports psychologist since she was 12 years old. And I think that's meaningful for athletes to hear and parents to hear that it doesn't mean that your child is broken if they want to work on the mental or the emotional. To me, the mental is more of the X's and O's of strategies, tactics, knowing who you are, what your strengths are, how to open up patterns and run patterns to expose your strengths. That, to me, that's always more the mental game. Score management, opponent profiling, and that stuff. But then the emotional side to me was always performance anxieties, which is, the fear, nervousness, tanking, panicking, choking, closing out leads, all the stuff that, we've been hearing forever. And so people are getting more into it. They're buying into that now. So,
well, I think you've had some dramatic instances in the last couple of years. I mean, my first thought is Osaka. I mean, here's a player that we all thought would be, okay, she's just going to roll through the rest of these girls. She has great strokes and she's pretty heady out there. But then all of a sudden, of all players, I was so surprised when I first read, oh, she's not playing this tournament because, and she, the stress is too much for her. I was like, whoa, I mean, it was a big surprise actually for me to see that, because I'm so used to Sampras and all these guys, and you never really heard about that. And there's a lot of talk, I guess, these days about openness and everything from inclusivity and all this. And some of it's too much for me, to be honest with you. Some of it's just too much. I'm like, come on. But then again, a lot of it's real. I know I had a lot of stress. One of the reasons I was so happy when the NCAAs ended for me, I was kind of relieved. I'm like, oh, fuck, the pressure's off. I've been having this pressure since the 12 and unders.
Right.
And I thought, shit, now I'm just going to coach and relax and let those guys have the pressure for the next 10 years. Because it was pretty stressful trying to please your parents, trying to not embarrass yourself, trying to make sure, that the girls in college like you, what I mean? There was just so much. So to make sure your coach doesn't drop you from 3 on the team to 6 on the team. And there's pressure all the time. And so I think I notice a lot of players will quit. In fact, most of the players that stay on and play the 35s and 45s, they're the ones that started late.
Oh, yeah.
The ones who started in the boys 10s and stuff like that, they're just happy to be done with it.
Yeah, I see that too, for sure. Well, my daughter, just from a tennis parent side, she hasn't picked up her racket since she finished playing at USC. So that's been a decade. So, and she grew up with all the kids, with Stevie and those guys. Sarah Fansler was my stepdaughter, and she.
I've heard that name. Sure.
Yeah, she was #1 in the nation and kind of played the US Open by 15, and she got enough. She was satisfied. She doesn't need to play adult ladies leagues. That's her point of view now. So maybe later in her 30s or 40s, maybe she'll pick up the game again. But, I think if you have 10,000 hours in, you deserve a little break,
Yeah, I agree. What is she in tennis still?
No, but a lot of the life skills though. She manages. It's a promotional company, but things like just perseverance and resiliency. She told me that she's going to call. Here's a good example of life skills really help after tennis. But there was an insurance company, a nationwide company, and she looked up and found the owner of the company. She goes, I'm going to call them every week until they buy our products. And she called them every week. So 3 months later, they end up buying the product. And she goes, it's from tennis. It's that no quit, resiliency and perseverance that she learned from playing a sport. And so I think that's really why parents need to know they're not paying for tennis. They're not paying for the game of tennis. They're paying for the life skills that, the child is going to get up at 6 a.m. and work out before school. That's what they're paying for, right? The ability to get back up and close out a match when they just tank the second set. Right. That's what they're paying for. All these life skills and character traits, and maybe even the moral compass when they have this urge, this twinkling to cheat or to cheat back, retaliation hooking. But now they have the moral compass, and they're not going to cheat. They're going to do it. They're going to win. They're going to win legit. And all these life skills that we want the kids to have in college and beyond, they're found in sports. And I don't think it's fair to say that tennis teaches life skills. I think it exposes life skills, and it exposes bad life skills. And so I think that happens even more so that, kids lose in a tournament match and you see they don't have time management. They don't have their organizational skills intact to prepare for pressure properly. And so they see all these life skills that are not quite ready for prime time. And that's what I love about tennis. It teaches that side. If the parents are mature enough to identify it,
Yeah, it's funny. Gosh, you're talking really brings up some stuff. And it's not just you. It's not just the player. It's the perception of the athlete.
Yeah.
My dad always said, I want you to be a beautiful tennis player. Or he says, if you're a beautiful tennis player or a beautiful golfer, he says, forget the other sports. He says, I'm talking about, and this is when I was a kid. He says, I'm talking about business, son. If you're a beautiful tennis player or a beautiful golfer, people will think, this is what he always said, people will think you're better than you are. And I always remembered that. And I said, well, that is interesting. Yeah. And it's true. I mean, let's face it. You look at a guy like Federer and you think he's just got to be the greatest human being on the earth, because who could play that beautifully and be an asshole? I mean, you couldn't do it. The guy is just, he really is poetry in motion, and there must be something special about him other than the way he plays tennis. And then, so I always remembered, people will think you're better than you are. And then it hit me once when I was about 26, I was kind of sick of coaching right then. And plus I had hurt my arm. It was really sore and still using small-headed. I wasn't going to switch to the Prince. I was like, screw that. It's a fad. Big rackets are a fad. So I was sticking with it. I was using some piece of crap. I was using Snoward or something, because I got like 20 a year. You needed 20 a year because they broke like popsicle sticks. And my arm was sore. And I just said, I got to try something else. So I applied to AT&T, of all places. Big corporation, didn't even own a suit. I had to borrow my roommate's suit and shoes. I didn't own a pair of shoes. And so I borrowed all my roommate's stuff, and I went there, and there were guys with beautiful little cross pens in their pocket, and they were dressed to the nines. And I thought, there's no way I'll ever get this job. So, because there were 350 applicants for 2 positions. And this was back in the 1980s. And I am old, man. I am old. You're a young man next to me. I can see that already. But so this guy, Charlie, was my boss, and I got the job. I was blown away, and I mean, literally blown away, because I told my roommate when I got home, I said, dude, there's not a chance in hell I'm getting this job. Not a chance in a million. And so I walked into my boss's office the very first morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, And I looked at him and I said, Mr. Button, he goes, no, call me Charlie. Okay. I got to ask you something. Why in the world did you hire me? That's what I said. I said, I'm here now. I'm on salary. I'm feeling good, but you got to tell me, why did you hire me? He goes, on your resume, it said you played for University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He says, I went to Chapel Hill. He said, I used to watch the tennis players in amazement and just go, how could they perform like that all the time and not miss and under big pressure, pass the guy or hit a big serve. He said, I was in awe of the tennis players at my school. We were 7 in the nation. And he said, that's why I hired you. So that kind of proved my father's point.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, very cool. Yeah. And it's a beautiful, yeah,
it really is. So what do you think about pickleball?
Well, honestly, I haven't played it yet. I did a lot of work in Wichita the last few years, and some of the ex-tennis players from the tennis team at Wichita State, the Shockers, they're the top pickleball players now on the tour. Lucy and Jay and Matt, and it's interesting that they're doing well. They're making a terrific living traveling and playing pickleball. But I'm just curious to see how it's going to affect the chiropractor's business, and from all the bending and the shots in the kitchen and the knees. I mean, I do get it that it's a game that the masses can play. Tennis is a little more difficult. I get that. The smaller court. And it's very social. I mean, to me, it kind of reminds me of what tennis was like when I was a little kid and the tennis boom, and you'd go to a court or a club and you couldn't even get on a court. And so, I mean, I don't mind it. I think it's gonna help tennis. I think tennis, it's already showing that tennis participation is actually up. So
is that right?
Yeah, so tennis is up with pickleball. They're both rising, but the only issue is the courts, right? That in my opinion, the pickleball athletes and the pickleball owners now should have their own pickleball facilities and not encroach on the tennis courts. But that's not
you must know about the San Diego issues. I've been reading about it. Big. I mean, they're in fisticuffs down there, I've heard.
Really?
That's what I've heard. I've heard at some clubs where they're putting the pickleball and this and that. I don't know. I guess my only point about pickleball is I think it's fine for people to be outside. I kind of relate it to surfing. I used to surf when I was in SoCal, until a year ago when I moved. And, people go, do you boogie board? I go, well, I can boogie board, but if you surf, why would you boogie board? That's kind of how I feel about tennis. I mean, if you have a nice ball, why would you play pickleball? And I don't know, the only thing I can think of is what we were talking about earlier about when you finish college tennis and all the guys quit.
Yeah.
I think pickleball, I hate to say it because it's my phrase these days, but it's kind of for quitters because you don't really put your heart on the line. I can tell you, tennis, every time you step out to play a match, it's almost like a prize fight. Every time you step on the court, you face possible humiliation. So many bad things can happen to you that day. And I don't feel it's that way in pickleball. I don't really feel, the racket's not 3 feet away from your hand. So, it's right, so there's really no chance of facing that humiliation. There's no chance of having an unbelievably bad day. I mean, so to me, I think it takes your heart off the line. And where tennis, your heart is always on the line in tennis. Yeah.
Well, it just seems a lot more social, but I'm sure at the higher levels, it gets pretty physical. But
I don't know if your book is.
It's a drinking game. I mean,
I agree.
It's like golf. I mean, you can play with a cigar and a cocktail and you're fine. You know what I mean? And anyway, that's what I see like around Newport is the bar is very crowded at pickleball, events. So
well, that's a good point. You're right. It is social first. I would say it's social first. at least at a certain level, a club level.
Yeah, but I mean, it's probably going to trickle down. And I haven't seen like junior clinics and things like that, or pickleball academies yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
Oh,
There's a
that's
lot
interesting.
of, there are a lot of tennis pros that are, they're loyal to the money they make. They're not really loyal to the game of tennis. So they're all teaching pickleball. They're all getting certified in pickleball coaching, and that's fine. I mean, that's the way for even a lot of country clubs, right? They want the tennis pros to be able to teach both.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Because they want members.
Right.
So,
No, I haven't gone down that road yet. I played once over at Bobby Riggs, where it's really big
okay.
right now. I played 3 sets and it was okay, but it certainly wouldn't take. I mean, let's put it this way, I never really wanted to play again.
Okay.
You
Good.
know, I think it's a good way to bring people together. And like you said, it's a drinking game. Like my neighbors here, I can't imagine I could ask my pals who are my neighbors to go hit some tennis balls, but I could imagine asking them to go play some pickleball. You can always have an okay time. You can't have an okay time in tennis if you have 1 weak link. I mean, even in doubles, 1 weak link, all of a sudden it's not much fun anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So tell me just a little bit more about, now you have another book out, or is that the only one, the Tennis Parent Bible?
No, I have about 10 books out.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I think 6 of them became #1 bestsellers. So I'm pretty lucky in the fact that, I don't know, like you said, if it's a writing style or the topics, but yeah, so in racket sports, they're doing well. I wrote for Human Kinetics, if you remember that book publisher.
I do remember it well.
And yeah, so Championship Tennis was I think they said it was their best-selling tennis book they've ever had. And that's a book that's kind of based on the whole game approach, where there's a lot of stroke mechanical topics in it and athleticism, and not just mental and emotional, but most of the books are really based on mental and emotional. Some are for coaches, like the soft science of tennis is based on coaching the game and why personality profiles matter and how we would adapt our teaching style to fit different personalities and how different people are wired differently, see the game differently, and even how different brain types play the game differently. Because some people are more patient, some are impatient, some are very intuitive and they want to just try it first and think about it later. Some are more sensates, and that's a certain personality profile that wants all the facts before they make a decision. And that athlete is taught a little bit different than an intuitive player if they want all the info. There's judgers and perceivers. And when we talk about the idea of Myers-Briggs type indicators, and so like a good example of athletes that are more of a perceiver brain type. These are people that their brain is not found in the here and now. They're not paying attention to what we're talking about. Their brain is already in the future. They're already thinking about what's for lunch, where's my meeting next or my homework next. So you see perceivers all the time. They get up 5-2 in a match. They're all of a sudden now thinking about, where's the trophy going to go in my room? What's my UTR going to go to? What are my parents going to say? What are my friends going to say when I beat this kid? And now they're so involved into the outcome, what if, future thoughts, they blow the lead. And they do it all the time.
It's 5-all. Sure, it's 5-all.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden they got to get their head back into the here and now, the present, instead of being future oriented. And so anyway, there's certain people we can just do personality profiling, and we can tell who's going to have trouble with what. And so to me, it's really interesting. Like another good example might be there's thinkers or feelers in the world of personality profiling. Thinkers impersonalize situations. Feelers are very in tune to the harmony of the group and they want to be friends with everybody. People that are really feelers, they have a boatload of trouble with gamesmanship, especially if the opponent accuses them of cheating. Boy, they're gone. They're just toast. So if we know how they're wired, we know the future problems that are going to come down the pike, you know. So that's Soft Science. That's a pretty interesting book. That was one of the best-selling books. And you know, I write for the PTR and do a lot with the USPTA both, and now with the USTA. So they're all backing these things and they're getting behind it. And anyway, we're trying to help teach the parents about how, you know, kids are wired. And so if anybody's interested in that, any listeners, just Google it. Google Myers-Briggs type indicator. And Myers and Briggs were a mother-daughter duo that studied the psychology of Carl Jung, right? But Myers and Briggs are not licensed psychologists. They wrote the most important type indicator probably in the history of psychology, and they're not even psychologists, but they studied the work and they came up with this Myers-Briggs type indicator. You can go online, just take a free course and take a free quiz. It takes maybe 10 minutes. And now all of a sudden you start to read and you realize you're wired a certain way. Like there's a 4-letter acronym. Like maybe you're more of an extrovert and you like being around people. You get energy by being around people. And maybe you're more intuitive. You like to go with your gut instincts. And maybe you're a thinker. Maybe you're a judger. A judger is a kind of person that rules and laws really apply. And they're very organized. They're the kind that make lists. Like I was coaching this kid in the Midwest. The dad's a good accountant, tremendous accountant, but a judger. And after every match, he would give his son his list. Here's the 15 things you're still doing wrong. Every match. And you can imagine that the kid does anything he can not to play a tournament because he's just going to be handed a list, right? And so anyway, there's a lot of different personality profiles, but to me, the thing that was super important in my life was when I talked about this. This is something that we did with Vic Braden back 20, 30 years ago. But 25 years ago, I talked to my father about personality profiling. Now, get this. He's more of an introvert. He's more of a loner. He likes being alone. He likes to have a lot of quiet time. Introvert, I'm more extrovert. He's more sensate. He wants all the facts. I'm more of an intuitive guy. He's more of a thinker. I'm more of a feeler. He's more of a judger. I'm more of a perceiver. So we're wired opposite. Now I'm in my 30s, and for the first time in my life, he says, you know, I've got to apologize. I raised you wrong. I tried to make you be like me, and you're not wired like me. You don't. No wonder why we didn't see the world the same. And so first time in my 30s, he tells me he loves me, and
wow.
he's fine. Yeah, and so it was really meaningful for families to, it stops a lot of wars because the parents are like, they're not doing it right. They're not doing it my way. They're not doing it correctly. And then they realize that the kid's not wired like you. And they solve problems differently.
Of course, my first thought goes to Andre. You know, he had some of those issues, you know, and I know Ruta and his sister and the whole family, you know, because the dad, I remember in the boys 14s, some tournament in SoCal. I can't remember if my boy beat him or lost to him, but I just remember they were leaving the tournament. The father, you know, he was a prize fighter and tough guy. Andre didn't win that tournament. He lost in the finals, but he played an age group up, you know, the usual. He was like 11. He played in the 14s. And the father, I watched him as they were walking out of the trophy. He says, "You lost this tournament." He took his trophy, ripped it from him, threw it in the trash, and they walked out. And that really weighed on me. I was like, wow, shit, I've never seen anything like that. And I mean, I you know, and I, you know, Andre ran away from camp, and, you know, Andre had tons of problems, drugs and everything else, because maybe it's because of exactly what you say. he was brought up really against his grain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was at a conference with Nick Bollettieri, and he goes, well, all I really did with Agassi was like, I just kept him out of jail.
Yeah.
That was his point.
See that.
But I mean, look at the incredible person Andre Agassi he became, and everything he's doing for the world is just amazing. And
yeah, and he married a fantastic wife.
Yeah, didn't he? He's a fielder. He's and more of a perceiver. But didn't he lose his first 2 Grand Slam finals to like Courier, who he beat most of the juniors, and he was supposed to win, I think, but he was too overwhelmed by.
He lost to Courier and Sampras, I think, in his first 2.
Okay.
I think so. And then I think, so it's not like we haven't had these issues through the years. Like I said, Osaka comes to mind now. But now that I think about it, what about Mary Pierce? Remember her? I mean, probably a very similar situation. I don't really know it that well. I just know that she banned her dad from coming to the tournaments or something weird like that. It was a very weird time.
That stuff still goes on. And obviously, but at the top major leagues, we see it. But boy, in the minor leagues, it sure is evident, right? The ITFs, that kind of thing. And
yep.
One of the issues that I think is important, because people are listening to this, that just because you might be an introvert or an extrovert, it doesn't mean you're 100% one way or the other. You might be 49%, 51%. And people that are well balanced, I think, are probably the most well suited for competition. But we all have a dominant side. And it's a little bit like, if you guys think about, people that are listening, if you think about batting in baseball, maybe you're dominant right-handed, your auxiliary side is you can bat lefty, but it's not quite as good. Or all of us as tennis players, maybe we can all serve and play right-handed, and we're, whatever, we're a UTR 9 or 10. But we can play left-handed, but it's not that great. That's our auxiliary side. It doesn't mean you can't be the other side, but we usually do have a dominant choice, and we're wired with that from birth. It's a genetic predisposition,
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I don't know if one really relates to the other, but for 30, 40 years, I was, remember, I'm from the 60s. I'm a little older than you, so I'm sort of brought up in that hippie era, everything from the inner game of tennis to remembering Rod Laver and John Alexander. Those guys would have a pint of Foster's before they played. It was a different world back then. Yes. But I remember reading a book called The Right Side of the Brain, and then another one called The Artist's Way. I don't know if you remember those. And then another one Dick Gould had me read called Psycho-Cybernetics.
Oh, yeah.
And all those books really weighed on me. I know in my 20s, early 20s, when I started coaching, I had never done it, but I had all my players, still do. All my players play lefty. Yeah. And we can all play set. I can serve. We can all serve lefty. We can play lefty. I just think it's very important. Kind of the premise of my boards too. The reasons I like this idea of a figure 8. I think you probably know about that. I mean, I don't know if you know me at all, but figure 8 was a big deal for me. And I think the figure 8 is sort of the yin yang of tennis, So I think I'm not sure if it weighs out on the brain. I imagine it does, but I think it's good to understand that whether you're hitting with your right hand or your left hand, it's really the same, and you shouldn't look at it that differently. Because, and I don't know, it just seems to me that the players that can play with their left hand are a little more balanced, period. So I don't know if you like your players using their left hand as well, but I kind of like in the beginning of every warm-up, we usually either go 2 hands on both sides short court to find that 45, that nice hitting point, so you can't reach and you have to actually swing, or we go left-handed. Good. So, I mean, either one, but that's how we start. We never start righty. It's either two hands on both sides, like Borg used to do way back when. He used to do that way back when, or it's left-handed And if you're a one-hander, you had to hit a one-handed left hand.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I've always thought that there was some correlation between the physical and the mental right there.
Sure. No, I think it is, as you know, as the brain sends these motor programs through the nervous system, and I think it's all linked for sure. I recommend any coaches out there that if you're, a great college player and you're coaching, start to hit left-handed, and it's gonna help remind you how difficult it is for beginners. So when you coach more beginners or intermediates, you have a little more compassion that it's not as easy as we feel it is, because we've been doing it for so long. We've all been doing that kind of stuff. And another thing that comes to mind, though, was this is way back in the net at the old Vic Braden Tennis College, but we did electromyography where we had these sensors, and club players would hit two-handed backhands with their right hand, and the left hand muscles would be just along for the ride. It would just be dead. Now, pros, the left hand would be firing like mad, right? Like a Rafael Nadal, left hand dominant, and the right hand would be pretty quiet. So opposite hands that club players and top players use. That was interesting to me too, way back then.
I remember that. Do you remember that one video that was going around? You had to find it. It was on an 8-track, and you had to find it, but it was a video of like Stan Smith and Chris Everett and all those players, and you saw how their motions, like you were saying, with those electrodes, and you saw that, and I got a hold of one, and I was watching it, and it was a little fluffier back then, the inner game and all that stuff. It was a little fluffy, but it was still they were on their way. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, right on.
Yours is a lot more scientific. Like I said, it's an easy read, but still, it definitely seems a little bit more pertinent, a little more scientific than just, feel and flow out there,
Yeah, I try to combine a little more of the science-based data. I guess that's from all those years at the tennis college where everything was studied. There was always data and collecting data and that kind of thing. So
yeah, God bless Vic. He really he was good for the game. He was one of the reasons that tennis was in its heyday in the mid 70s. I got to give him and Bud Collins. I mean, these guys, they were kind of a little goofy in their time, actually, both of them. But in looking in retrospect, you really have to give them a lot of credit, because they brought tennis. Tennis was way ahead of golf in the mid 70s. Everyone wanted to be a tennis player, and all the celebrities, everybody was doing tennis,
Yeah, that's true, huh? We got to do a little shout out to our friend Dick Gould, who has an incredible new book out right now. So people should check that out if they're interested in the mind and coaching and mindset. So I recommend that for sure. So anyway, there's a lot of good stuff out there now, and it's a privilege to still be able to do it after I'm in my 40th year. So it's a privilege to still be able to do it and to enjoy. I'm only on the court now with players, I would say 20 hours a week.
Yep.
But I probably do another 10 of just Zoom sessions, like real match play video analysis, because now, of course, with the modern technology, I could have players from anywhere in the world send me the Zoom of the match, and we, just like you and I are doing right now, we can just go through, quantify the data, do chart, and it's,
in some ways it's better. I have several of Zoom students, and I on my site, you'll maybe go through it one day. I have live lessons Sunday. So every Sunday I put in one of my live lessons during the week. I put it on for the other pros to watch. But It's amazing how much you can get done, because sure, I love the lessons. Like yesterday, it's great to be on the court. It's great to hit and do some drills, but you can't do what you can do on Zoom calls. I can take a good player, a UTR 10 or 11 or 12, and I can compare them side by side with a Djokovic, or if I'm talking one-handed backhand, I put him against Wawrinka. If I'm talking two-handed backhand, I can put him against Kyrgios or Murray, one of the or Djokovic. I love those two-handed backhands, and say, look, Don't you see at this point of the stroke, you've lost your coil? Look how they hang on to their coil a little longer than you. That makes a big difference. You can't do that in a private lesson on court, but you can on the Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah. It's terrific. So I highly recommend coaches out there, if you're, looking for different ways to maximize the athlete's potential, but also maybe ways for you to get off the court a little bit and save your hips and your knees. Start to do match play video analysis with all of your players. Try to get them or their parents to videotape one match, where it matters, where they're being judged, where, they're really keeping score. And you can quantify hardware or software. I mean, you can do all the strokes.
Sure.
Primary, secondary strokes. You can break down, high and heavy strokes compared to short angle strokes, compared to open stance or closed stance. You can compare swing volleys to drop volleys. You can,
you can even look at their psychological disposition. Is their head down? Are they tapping the racket on the court? All kinds of stuff.
It's beautiful. And look, there's so many things that you can, let me go through a couple things that coaches can do in kind of a video analysis session that I would do, which is more software. But let me go through it, because I wrote a couple things down earlier when I was thinking about this to help coaches. But we can identify the athlete's dialogue, right? And it's a self-coaching. You can tell by, maybe you can't hear it, but you can tell by their eyes and their facial expressions and body language, right? Obviously, strokes and movement efficiencies and deficiencies, right? And it's very important, in my opinion, that visual learning is probably the most common. So athletes need to see themselves. A lot of times we as coaches might see the match, or for sure parents see it, but guess who doesn't see it? It's the person that needs to see it the most, right? Anticipatory skills. We would do things like, as we would freeze frame the opponent is continental grip, lunging, vulnerable, about ready to float up a slice, and our kid's still standing, 10 feet behind the baseline, not paying attention.
Right. Picking their nose. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff. And like you said, they're between point rituals and score management. What are they doing with changeovers and charting? I mean, for me, a big key with a lot of the coaches listening, you can do something called the cause of error chart. And this is where you and the athlete will identify, maybe here's the four main causes. The error might be stroke mechanics. It might be caused by poor movement or spacing. It might be just reckless shot selection, or it might be poor emotions and, that type of thing. But sometimes for me, it's meaningful to chart the cause of the errors. I got a chart from a parent a while ago, a couple of weeks back now. The parent said, you got to fix my kid's backhand. He made 28 backhand errors. And we looked at the film, and about 22 were reckless shot selection.
Right.
And so for me, feeding balls or fixing the mechanics.
Right. Going down the line when they should be thinking cross court. Sure.
Yeah. And so the parent thinks that we're going to fix it by working on form. But look, what if form wasn't the problem? What if it was the recklessness of, like you said, you going for drop shots too often, or
right
up the line when they're supposed
like Alcaraz last night? He was driving me nuts in the first early sets, going for those ridiculous drop shots.
Yeah. But anyway, there's so many things. And
no, you're right. We could go on and on forever. I will say one thing before I do let you go, because I really enjoy this. Like I said, I can't believe, I had a feeling we are going to get on like this, because I still can't believe we haven't crossed paths, but we will from now on. But one thing I will say, I almost always used the video and all that stuff for strokes. I'm really a technician now, because I guess I never played the effortless game. I always won ugly, in my own opinion. I think a lot of players think that way, but some of my, disciples or fans or whatever, oh no, you play a great game. And I'm like, well, you don't know how I feel. That's why I love Roger so much. I was like, That's who I want to. I want to play like Curios. I want to play like Roger. I want to play like a bird flies. You know what I mean? I don't want to. I don't want to look like I'm trying. I want it to be look natural.
Yeah.
But I will say one thing about video. A lot of my students, I started to figure it out in the early 2000s. Take video of them crying. I'll tell you what, I made my players look at themselves, and they were high ranked 12 and unders. And I didn't say a word because I knew. And so I just kept videoing in between points, in between, not just stopping at the end of the point. And I would watch them walk back, and you'd hear him say, so I can't believe I'm playing like this. God, what does the matter with me? And whining. I tell you what, they watched that video once. I had a couple of kids say, please, Jack, stop. Don't make me watch this anymore.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, you want to cure bad behavior? Let them watch themselves.
Yeah.
That I do remember. In fact, I even remember on myself in college, I think someone took a video of me, and I was whining about something. And I was like, oh my God, I never want to be seen like that again.
I think it's big. It's huge for players to do that. And I also recommend for coaches, take your cell phone where you have the dictation app and put it in your teaching basket. Oh, yeah. And record yourself teaching for a lesson. And then when you drive home, listen to your own lesson, and you'll be surprised. We think we're so positive and optimistic, right? Then we hear the tape and we're like, oh my God, I have to refund my money to that poor kid.
I hear you. I do a lot of video, and I tell you, I've really tempered a lot of things about myself. I'm like, God, you're an asshole. You know, I mean, I'm like, you got to stop that, Jack. You really got to stop that. But like I said, Frank, I really enjoyed meeting you today very much.
Yeah, me too.
As much as possible. Hey, you know, I was going to say, if you'd like, we should continue the conversation. If you'd like, I'd be honored to put your book on. I get some pretty good traffic, and I'd like to put your book on our site and make you a partner, because I think what you have is so valuable. Like I said, I didn't have time to read this weekend, and somehow I read 100 pages of your book.
Well, look, if you want to put the Tennis Parent Bible, you can put it on your site, just absolutely free for anybody that think they can use it, and they can even give it to their parents of their players. And
wow, that's awfully generous of you. I wasn't even going to ask for that, but that's awfully generous. And my coaches, listen, the guys that are members of my site, they're real conscientious. They're coaching some of the top players in the country. So my guess is they'll reach out to you eventually, because they're like us, you know, they're not the typical tennis pro looking at their watch and trying to make their tennis shoes and tennis shorts last another 2 years. These guys, you know what I mean? There's certain pros that invest in their profession. The guys that I work with, every one of them, they're phenomenal. They really invest in what they do, and they're watching this right now. So kudos to them. But yes, that would be phenomenal if I can do that.
Yeah. Well, you have the ebook, so feel free. And
I'll do it.
Yeah, and it's great if the coaches realize that if they can educate the parents and get the parents on their side, that's their best sales force. They want to increase the numbers of athletes in their academy. It's just word of mouth by parents. And if they're helping parents and possibly even doing their own webinars once a month, where they do their own tennis parent webinars, and they're, helping answer questions and get some of the parents of the kids that were very successful, have them jump on the webinar, and they can mentor, and it helps everybody.
I have a couple of Zoom students in Orange County and LA and San Diego right now. I would like to send them to you, not the kids, the parents. Do you ever do sessions with parents?
Yeah, all the time. I did one this morning. I think I told you a family from Miami, and it's basically the parents. It's
yeah. It's that group between UTR 6 and UTR 8. You know what I mean? That's the pivot. It's sort of a pivotal spot right there.
Yes.
And it'd be great. And these kids are 14 years old, so they're pretty damn good. If you're a UTR 7.5 at 14, you're doing pretty good. You're in the top 60 in SoCal. And that's where this kid is. But I think a lot of my students would benefit, and the parents certainly would. But it's both, of course.
Yeah.
It's a
Well, yeah.
win-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you want to send them over, we can chat, and then we'll see what's going on, and let's stay in touch.
Good. Let's do that. Hey, Frank, thanks so much, and have a great week.
Yeah. All right. You too. Bye, everybody.
It was my pleasure. So long.
All right.